Not sure if you are aware of any of these stories, as not many across the nation are apparently. There have been recent incidents that happened here in Washington state that should have made world news, national at the minimum, but merely bits and pieces were shared locally over mainstream media. After doing some research of my own, I discovered even more, and it really hit home base for me. I live in Spokane, Washington, which is about 350 miles from Seattle, Washington. Back when I was 9 years old, I had a very bad experience, where I was close to being kidnapped, while on my way to school one morning. I walked the same route every day, where I would leave my grandparents' house out the back door, head down the alley, cross the street and walked another block and a half. My school was not very far away. When I got towards the end of the alley one morning, a big white van pulled in and blocked my pathway. A man stepped out of the driver's seat and kept his van running. He had what appeared to be some kind of rope in his hands and was wearing gloves. He asked me if I knew where 7-Eleven was. I stopped walking towards the van and told him where it was. He told me he couldn't hear me because his car was so loud and asked me to come closer. I told him that I wasn't allowed to talk to strangers. So he started walking towards me. I turned around and started running back towards my grandparents' house. He got in his van and started driving up behind me. I ran off to the side of the alley and he drove up to the side of me while I was running and caught hold of my coat and backpack. I was terrified and screaming as loud as I could. I reached my grandparents' neighbor's house and was able to free myself by grabbing hold of her fence. My grandfather heard me screaming and came running out the back gate into the alley with his shotgun, fired off a few rounds, and the man in the white van drove off. The police came out, took a report, and that was all we'd ever seen or heard of it again. Fast forward 31 years. I have been hearing about many recent child trafficking incidences over in Seattle and the surrounding areas, and I felt compelled to research these stories I was hearing. During my research, I stumbled upon this documentary. See link 1 in description. While watching that documentary, I discovered something that may have had some correlation to when I was nearly kidnapped. Around that time, there was a man who committed suicide by jumping off of the top floor of a derelict building in downtown Spokane. I don't recall ever hearing anything about that incident happening when I was younger, nor does anyone else I've questioned, not even my parents. In fact, we rarely heard about any crime much at all in the city. The documentary also revealed that the man who committed suicide had ties with a particular administration, not going to say the name out loud, just as so many other suicides have from the past. Anyhow, the incident I went through has not been forgotten and probably never will, so when I hear stories about child trafficking, it catches my attention. This last summer, there were 2 serious incidences that occurred in the Seattle at Whidbey Island, Washington area, about 350 miles from Spokane. The knowledge I have gained through my research on child trafficking has taught me that many crimes we hear bits and pieces of over the mainstream media, including the plane hijacking and crashing on Ketron Island, Washington, have direct correlation to child trafficking. This really began to catch my attention now. I began digging into many of the stories we hear over media deeper and researching all the people involved in every story or headline. I realized there seems to be so much more to many of these stories than any of us are being told, a lot more. It has become apparent to me that many of these criminals and sick individuals either are or have a history involved with child trafficking. Were you aware that there was a rocket missile that was fired off of an unidentified submarine from the Puget Sound waters, out in Skunk Bay off of Whidbey Island, which is about a 2-hour drive from Seattle and about 350 miles from Spokane, my hometown? See link 2 in description. Also, were you aware that around the time the missile rocket was launched out of Skunk Bay, one of Trump's Air Force One decoy jets landed just 350 miles away at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane? Here is a link to the article that was printed in our local newspaper. The headline read, "Doomsday plane that followed president arrives at Fairchild." So what exactly do they mean by doomsday? See link 3 in description. Of course, nobody has even heard anything about the missile rocket that was fired off in Skunk Bay, off of Whidbey Island, here in Spokane, and few from Seattle heard about it themselves. However, the people in Seattle, Whidbey Island, and its surrounding areas didn't hear about Air Force One's decoy landing in Spokane either. Finally, were you aware of the plane hijacking and crash that took place in Seattle, where our Air Force sent out fighter jets from Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane? The fighter jets did not have to resort to taking the hijacked plane down though, as it appeared to purposefully crash land on Ketron Island, Washington. I began realizing that few people in Spokane even heard anything about the plane hijacking and crash over mainstream media coverage. See link 4 in description. To me, if I were smart, I'd think that there was a possible assassination attempt if Trump made, which failed, over the skies of Washington state. Wouldn't you agree that if a missile or rocket was launched anywhere on or near U.S. soils, a national emergency alert should have been issued? In my opinion, a missile launch is a declaration of war and should never go ignored. A plane hijacking and crashing would most definitely fit into that category as well. More research on plane hijacking crash rabbit hole. After more in-depth researching I've conducted that on November 15, 2015, James Porter, 47, who served a 20-year-long career as Pierce County's Superior Court deputy clerk, was accused of using court records for finding girls for sadistic sex, was arrested. On May 20, 2016, Porter was sentenced to 1 year and 9 months for commercial sexual abuse of minors. James Porter and his wife Nicole Pham were 2 of the 17 residents who lived on Ketron Island where the hijacked plane crashed. See link 5 in description. Amongst the few houses that were built and occupied on Ketron Island, there is also a Washington State DSHS-registered Children's Psychiatric Unit and Treatment Center. This troubled children's psychiatric and rehabilitation center is called Ketron Cottage. It was just a few small cottages for severely troubled children and teens. You can find more information here. See link 6 in description. Ketron Cottage Medical Personnel, Program Director, Michelle Giarese, PhD Psychiatrist, Mixed-Dork. MD Psychiatrist Social Worker, Eilis Hernandez. Cottage Supervisor, Angel Beckford. Program Director Michelle Giarese, PhD License, PY 60,339,093. Washington. Graduated in 2012 from University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Practice areas: everything from ADHD to sexual abuse to women's issues. See link 7 in description. Psychiatrist Mixed-Dork, MD University of WA Bio. See link 8 in description. Dr. Mixed-Dork wrote an article on the Science Direct webpage, under Child Abuse and Neglect, Volume 19, Issue 5, May 1995, pages 555-568, titled, Sexually Inappropriate Behaviors in Seriously Mentally Ill Children and Adolescents, : See link 9 in description. So here we have a poem that was written by what appears to be a current or former teen patient living in Ketron Cottage. See link 10 in description. James Porter and Nicole Pham's former Ketron Island address: 10,103 and 10,101 Morris Boulevard, Steilacoom, Washington, 98388. According to the Pierce County Assessor's excise tax affidavit, found under instrument number 4,370,221. See link 11 in description. Article written after James and Nicole purchased home on July 12, 2015. See link 12 in description. Before they purchased that home, it was listed for sale on a YouTube video on September 12, 2014 for $1,299,900. In the video you see quite a few owl statues. See link 13 in description. The owl, symbol of the Freemasons. See link 14 in description. The home located at 10,101 Morris Boulevard, Steilacoom, Washington, 98388 was foreclosed on after James Porter, formerly Pierce County's Superior Court deputy clerk of 20 years, was sentenced on May 20, 2016 to 1 year and 9 months incarceration. For commercial trafficking and sexual abuse of minor children, only 1 year and 9 months. I sense some real rabbit hole muckery going on with this incident too. What federal judge, who wasn't corrupt, would sentence a convicted commercial child sex trafficking and abuser to only 1 year and 9 months? I think there should be a little more research investigated into the judge who was overly fair with James' sentencing, wouldn't you agree? 3 months ago, there was a house listed for sale, in Steilacoom, WA. Can you guess who it was who listed this home on the market? James Porter. He's a real estate agent now. As you will see and hear in this video, James Porter blatantly lies. He claims he has lived in that house for over 12 years. How could he have lived in that house for 12 years but was living at 10,101 Morris Boulevard, Steilacoom, Washington, 98388 at the time of his arrest on November 15, 2015? See link 15 in description. I've also discovered that James Porter was one of the many defendants who were involved in the Countrywide mortgage scandal, causing Countrywide to go belly up. The court documents are found here. See link 16 in description. I believe this incident involving the hijacking crash gave us even more clues to reference off 2 other men who shared the same name as the plane hijacker, which was Russell Williams, one of which operated a warship submarine, Naval Lieutenant Commander Russell Williams, Jr. He served the Naval Academy from 1934 to 1960, died August 19, 1993, which I believe he was a clue to help us figure out which warship submarine was used to fire off the missile in Skunk Bay. See link 17 in description. The other was Carl David Russell Williams. I believe he was referencing to. Carl David Russell Williams is a former colonel in the Canadian Forces, where he commanded CFB Trenton, Canada's largest military airbase. In February 2010, David Russell Williams was arrested and pleaded guilty as a serial sadistic rapist and killer, which really seems to resemble what James Porter was arrested for: sadistic sex with minor children, abuse and commercial trafficking. See link 18 in description. Here is the link to Carl David Russell Williams' confession. See link 19 in description. In my opinion, the hijacker looks very similar to Carl David Russell Williams, the serial killer. It seems there's a lot more we have not been told over social media, wouldn't you agree? If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to think that Ketron Island was just another child sex trafficking airport, don't you? I've also recently stumbled upon another website blog where a group of others, whom wish to remain anonymous, seem to be working together on these stories, as it appears there is more than just one children's psychiatric unit in the Seattle area. In fact, these facilities are all across the state. See link 20 in description. What's even worse than that and absolutely heartbreaking? I stumbled upon what appears to be a poem written by a 14-year-old boy who was living in Ketron Cottage, on Ketron Island. The child comes straight out with the opening to his poem by stating life on Ketron looks like burning flames, : See link 21 in description. Now, we must look at other mysterious suicides and murder-suicide cases, such as the one with Senator Nancy Schaefer. During the time her and her husband were found dead, Nancy was investigating human-child trafficking issues she began recognizing as a huge problem. It wasn't long after her first arrests and engaging into a new civil rights movement, her and her husband both lost their lives. Their families had no indication they were going through any mental health issues, as they believed both were very happy. Of course, the case was quickly closed and ruled out as a murder-suicide, whereas the reports indicate that Nancy's husband killed her and then shot himself. The police records also indicate that both Nancy and her husband left goodbye letters for their family. With everything that seems to be happening everywhere we look, so you honestly believe it was a murder-suicide? See link 22 in description.